Welcome to the Deep Dive, the only place where we take a monumental stack of competitive source material, throw it in the analytical fire, and deliver you the absolute best nuggets of insight you need to understand the new meta. And we have a monumental task today. I mean, we're tackling one of the most volatile topics the competitive community has generated all year. But before we jump into it, if you're enjoying the content and want to see more, make sure to hit subscribe, like the video, and let us know what you think about today's topic. We know you've probably got a lot to say, and we'd love to see it in the comments. Depending on how the conversation goes, we might even turn it into a topic for a future episode, just like today. In fact, this entire episode was birthed straight out of the comment section by Adam Carey 6093.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about the stunning and, I guess, controversial dominance of the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard, under their Grizzled Company detachment in this winter 2025 season.
It's a big one, and the reaction has been intense.
It has, and our entire deep dive today is anchored around a single incredibly potent community observation, a comment that I think just distills the emotional core of this entire competitive shift.
It really does. This is like decades of tabletop psychology condensed into one sharp observation. I'm going to quote it directly from Adam Carey 6093 because it's really the heart of our analysis today. It goes, "When guard is on top, the meta is broken. Someone is always on top. The guard gets there and it is broken. Time for our time in the sun."
And that sentiment right there, it encapsulates a friction point that is as old as competitive wargaming itself.
What's that?
It's the perception of, let's call it, asymmetrical tolerance for dominance. I mean, think about it. When a highly mobile, complex, or low model count faction wins, like Eldari or Custodes, the community often chalks it up to high player skill or clever list building.
Right. Oh, he's a genius. He played his opponent.
Exactly. But when the common soldier, the massed infantry of the Guard, achieves the same feat, the immediate cry is, the rules are cheating, or this detachment is broken. It's just a totally different reaction. So our mission today is to dig into the data and see if that gut feeling, that emotional plea from the Guard player for their moment, is actually statistically valid.
We are embarking on a forensic analysis, really, to deconstruct the rules, the data, and I think the psychological impact of this Grizzled Company. We want to prove why, yes, this really is their time in the sun, and maybe get to the bottom of why the community reacted so fiercely to its arrival. Okay, so to set the stage, we first have to talk about the sheer magnitude of the competitive shift that happened in winter 2025. This wasn't just a routine patch.
Not even close. Our sources all point to this update, which the community, with a sort of wry nod to the holiday timing dubbed the Grotmissas calendar, was actually a comprehensive competitive reset. It was disguised as holiday cheer.
A comprehensive reset disguised as holiday cheer. I should have known when the new rules were dropping faster than my credit card debt in December. But seriously, I remember those reveals. We got, 24 straight days of substantive, game-changing rules?
All compressed into a 3-week window. The speed was chaotic, and I think it was deliberate. It forced players across every competitive faction to just ditch the old playbook immediately.
You had no choice.
None. And that speed is critical because it maximized the sense of discovery and urgency. But more importantly, it established a new core philosophical shift for what success looks like in 10th edition. We moved away from winning based on, let's say, raw datasheet efficiency, which is just the simple math that says my unit is better than yours point for point in a vacuum.
Right. We moved from that to success via complex conditional synergy.
That's the key phrase right there. Complex conditional synergy. So the old days of just finding the best unit and spamming it are pretty much over. Now, victory belongs to the player whose unit is devastating only when 3 specific conditions are met. Maybe standing on an objective, being affected by an order, and perhaps, as we'll see, even being in a battle shock state.
It's about building a finely tuned engine then. Every gear has to mesh perfectly.
And the Grizzled Company is the primary disruptor that perfectly exploited this new philosophy, becoming the absolute benchmark for conditional lethality in this new meta. And that's why we have to start our analysis with a bit of a history lesson.
Okay, let's unpack this time in the sun feeling by first acknowledging the Guard's deep identity as the underdog, or as everyone calls them, the NPC faction.
That's the one. The generic massed infantry whose purpose in the story is often to be slaughtered by the cool protagonists like Space Marines or Tyranids, just to show how serious the threat is.
Right, they're the red shirts of the 41st millennium.
Exactly. So the background radiation of the Guard's competitive history is one of constant struggle. It's always felt like playing the game on hard mode. So when they do achieve competitive strength, it's often through these, let's say, non-thematic or highly specialized means that the community quickly labels as a problem. To understand how big a deal the Grizzled Company is, we need to contrast it with their past moments of glory.
Okay, take us back. What was the first time the Guard really, truly dominated the game?
That would have to be the Leaf Blower precedent from 5th edition. This list archetype relied entirely on an obscene, almost non-interactive volume of fire.
I remember this. It was manticores, right? Lots of manticores.
So many manticores. Their barrage rule back then was just devastating, and you'd pair that with multiple units of Vendetta gunships and just a sea of chimeras.
So it wasn't about clever flanking or positioning, it was about forcing an immediate stat check on your opponent.
It was pure stat check. If your opponent could not weather over 100 strength shots per turn, often not needing line of sight, they just lost. The list completely negated your opponent's agency because you couldn't even move your models before they were just gone. Pre-game shooting, turn 1 shooting, game over.
A pure brute force list.
Unadulterated brute force. And while it was effective, it didn't feel very Guard-like. It was more about abusing the vehicle rules of the time than celebrating the common soldier.
Okay, so what came next after that?
Much later, we had the Castellan era in 8th edition. This was a classic competitive trick that dominated the meta for months, but the Guard wasn't the star of that show.
Not at all. They were the battery.
Right. The whole point of the Guard part of the list was to take cheap infantry and officers primarily to generate command points, CP, which are the resource you use to fuel your powerful abilities.
Ah, right. So the Guard was basically just playing an accounting minigame generating CP to power up a superweapon from a different army, the Imperial Knight Castellan.
Correct. The Castellan was the 800-pound gorilla that ate all the CP. The Guard's role was just to stand in the corner, produce the income, and then die. It was a victory of Imperial bureaucracy, not the inherent fighting power of the Guard themselves. Guard players hated it.
You were just playing a support role for another faction's big cool robot. I get it. Okay, and the most recent one?
The most recent precursor was the Born Soldiers anomaly in late 9th edition. This was a rule that gave the entire army, including every single lasgun, the ability to automatically wound, what the rules now call lethal hits, on a successful hit roll of 6.
Right, the exploding sixes. I remember that.
That's the one. And that trait allowed humble lasguns, the proverbial flashlights, to become existential threats to high-toughness targets. We're talking greater daemons, even knights. They could just bypass the toughness characteristic entirely.
It was powerful, sure, but it was also super swingy.
Deeply reliant on high variance, you had to fish for those critical sixes. You could still have a turn where the dice gods just turn their back on you and suddenly your 30-man blob of infantry does absolutely nothing.
Okay, so here's the crucial distinction then. What makes the Grizzled Company fundamentally different from all those past eras of Guard strength, from the Leaf Blower's brute force to the Born Soldier's luck?
The current dominance is distinct because it doesn't rely on high rolls. You aren't fishing for sixes anymore. It relies on the systematic elimination of low rolls.
Okay, say more about that.
The core mechanism of the Grizzled Company raises the statistical floor of the Army's output to a level of certainty we've just never seen for this faction. A Born Soldiers list could still fail a key shot because of bad dice. A Grizzled Company list statistically almost cannot because they are systematically re-rolling all their failures.
That shift from hoping for a spike of luck to achieving statistical reliability, that's what the analysts are calling broken, isn't it?
It is. In a game built on the variance of dice rolls, the faction that can systematically remove chance and replace it with guaranteed output is the faction that wins.
Okay, let's unpack this mathematical shift. The Grizzled Company's transformation rests on two foundational pillars, right? Command, economy, efficiency, and variance mitigation.
Absolutely. We have to start with Pillar 1, the Order Economy Revolution. This is the subtle rule that delivered a massive financial kickback to Guard players. It's often overlooked because everyone focuses on the flashy damage output.
Which rule is that specifically?
The detachment rule states, add 1 to the number of orders each Astra Militarum officer model from your army can issue. It seems so minor, doesn't it, just adding 1 to a stat?
Seems simple enough.
But it fundamentally solved the Guard's biggest structural inefficiency, what I call the support tax.
This support tax, that makes perfect sense. I mean, before this update, the Guard was uniquely taxed for wanting to play optimally. If you wanted your whole battle line, say 3 Leman Russ executioners and 2 infantry squads to operate at their best, you had to take an officer for each one.
Exactly. A standard tank commander could only issue 1 order, so he'd either order himself or a single peer tank. If you needed 5 ordered units, you had to budget points for 4 or 5 expensive HQs. We're talking tank commanders at over 200 points, or extra castellans and command squads. They were necessary overhead. They were a tax on efficiency.
That's it. So you were spending points on units that didn't primarily contribute damage. They just enabled other units to function. That was points not being spent on more guns. So this new rule, it's basically a points refund.
It's a massive refund. It effectively gives back 100 to 150 points to the Guard player. This is huge. Think about the impact. A tank commander goes from 1 order to 2. It can manage itself and a peer tank. Ursula Creed goes from 2 orders to 3, becoming this low-cost, high-leverage nexus of efficiency that controls a huge part of your gun line all by herself.
But hold on, if everyone else got new detachments in the Grotmissas update, why is a 100-point refund unique to Guard? Isn't that just standard optimization?
That's a great challenge, and the answer lies in the sheer cost of the Guard's enabler units. No other faction relies on a specific unit type, the officer, for like 90% of its offensive efficiency. For a Space Marine list, saving 150 points might just mean you add an extra squad of infiltrators. For the Guard, those 150 points are a transfer of cost from low-impact support roles to high-impact combat roles.
So what does that 150 points actually buy you on the table?
It buys a Leman Russ Demolisher. It buys you 2 full squads of Kazarkin. It buys a core of durable Bullgrins. So the Guard player is now running a materially larger, more combat-active army, an army that can fight and enable itself efficiently for the exact same points cost as their opponent. It's an immediate competitive edge.
And that financial efficiency leads us right into the second pillar.
Directly into Pillar 2, ruthless discipline and variance removal. This is the rule that opponents complain about most because it feels like Guard tanks just never miss.
Okay, so let's break down the rule and the math of the complaints.
The core rule is that ordered units re-roll 1s to hit. That's already strong. It eliminates about 17% of your natural failures right off the bat. But here's the kicker, the objective part.
The objective part.
If the target is within range of an objective marker, they also re-roll 1s to wound.
And that compound success rate, getting to remove low rolls on both the hit and the wound phase, is where the probability curve just explodes into the competitive stratosphere. You're removing the gamble from the game.
Let's use an example, what I'm calling the casino cannon rehabilitation. For years, the Leman Russ Vanquisher has been a joke, just completely unplayable in tournaments. It has 1 high-damage shot, but with a standard ballistic skill of 4+, it had a 50% chance to just miss.
I remember taking 3 of them in 6th edition, just because they looked cool. I called them my hope and a prayer cannons.
Well, those days are over. Now, under the full Grizzled buff, that's the take-aim order for +1 to hit, plus the detachment's rerolls, that Vanquisher becomes a reliable anti-tank sniper. Firing at a T-12 vehicle on an objective, its base hit roll becomes a 3+ rerolling 1s. That's about a 77% chance to hit. Its wound roll is often also a 3+ rerolling 1s, another 77%.
The new math is just astonishing. We have to dedicate a moment to the core data point here because our probability matrix shows a staggering difference. We're talking about a standard Leman Russ battle cannon firing at a toughness 10 target.
Right, and in the competitive world, marginal gains like a 5% increase in efficiency can win you the game. Here, the baseline net success rate for that tank is about 16.6%. The full Grizzled rule pushes that net success rate to 34.5%.
Wow, okay, that's the core number right there. 34.5% is more than double the baseline. That's a whopping 107% increase in effective damage output against hard targets on objectives.
It doesn't just improve the tank, it fundamentally changes the strategic relationship between the tank and its target. It removes the gamble.
And that's catastrophic for opponents.
It is, because it means the guard player no longer prays to the dice gods. They just execute a firing solution with mathematical certainty. When you look across the table and see 5 Leman Russ tanks, you used to think, okay, maybe 3 will miss, 2 will fail to wound. Now you know exactly how much damage per turn is coming your way, and that number is just too high for most armies to absorb.
So here's where it gets really interesting, and where the rule shifts from just a math advantage to a devastating psychological weapon. That conditionality, the roll to wound only activating if the target is on an objective, it creates a trap.
This is the objective trap. This is the checkmate scenario. The rule turns your opponent's core mission, scoring points, into a fatal liability. You have to stand on the objective to win the game, but if you do, the Grizzled Company kills you.
So explain the dilemma in practice. What does the opponent see? What choice do they have?
They have to choose between 2 losses. Option 1, they take the objective. They move their unit on there to score points. The moment they do, they activate the guard's full lethality protocols. Their unit, even something super tough like custodes, wardens, or terminators, is mathematically vaporized because of that double efficiency output we just talked about.
Okay, so what's option 2? If they avoid the objective?
They preserve the unit, they survive the turn, but they score 0 primary points. And against a guard opponent who rarely runs out of bodies and who controls the midfield through sheer fear, losing on primary scoring is a slow, inevitable death sentence. You lose the game not by being killed, but by being outscored.
It's a slow bleed. So the guard imposes this stat check that you have to pass on turn 2 or 3. It's not just can your unit survive an attack, it's can your entire army absorb a guaranteed damage per turn threshold that is mathematically too high to manage.
Let's use a concrete example for the listener. Say I put a squad of 6 Custodes Wardens, a 300-point unit, onto an objective. What's the guard response?
The guard player lines up 2 Rogel-Dorn battle tanks and a Leman Russ demolisher. The tank commander issues take aim to all of them. The demolisher, which is normally super risky, now fires 6 to 9 shots, hitting on 3s, re-rolling 1s, and wounding your T6 wardens on 2s, re-rolling 1s.
The sheer volume and consistency of damage just overwhelms the Warden's high save and their -1 damage roll. Even if you roll hot on your 4+ invulnerable saves, you're losing 4 models minimum.
So my 300-point unit is now 2 guys, and I scored maybe 5 points for it, and they're about to be deleted next turn by an army that got a 50-point discount just for existing.
And that's the feeling. That's being in the meat grinder effect. The opponent is forced into a hopeless war of attrition, feeding expensive units onto objectives where the guard's point-efficient, reliable mass just never runs out of bullets.
It's the lack of interactivity. The outcome feels predetermined.
Totally. It feels like you were just executing the damage calculation the guard player already ran in their head during deployment. That's what fuels the broken label.
So the detachment rule is the foundation. It gives them consistency and a surplus. But the guard still has traditional weaknesses, right? Melee combat for one.
For sure, and dealing with concentrated high-toughness threats. But the 3 specific unit interactions we're about to cover are what I call the trinity of dominance. They plug these traditional weaknesses and elevate the whole army from just strong to truly top tier.
Okay, where do we start?
We have to start with the solution to the guard's historic melee vulnerability. For decades, the only answer to a dedicated melee threat was shoot them before they get here. Now, they have the Bullgren Black Hole powered by the Abhuman Detail enhancement.
Right. Bullgren's the big, tough guys. T6, a 4++ invuln save, and the -1 damage from their shields. They were always a great defensive anvil, but they hit like wet noodles.
That was the limitation. They hit on 4s in combat. They were a durable speed bump, a wall. The Abhuman Detail enhancement fundamentally breaks their design by allowing a commissar who could never order them before to issue orders to Ogren and Bullgren Bulgrin units.
Ah, another perfect example of that complex conditional synergy. It requires a specific unit paired with a specific character using a specific enhancement to activate the whole thing.
Exactly. Now combine that with the order Fixed Bayonets, which gives +1 to hit and -1 AP in combat. Layer the detachment's reroll 1s to hit on top. The result? Bulgrin's hitting on a 2+ rerolling 1s. That's a 97% hit rate in melee. That's a dedicated melee assassin profile.
It's devastating. A unit designed as a durable, slow defensive anchor transforms into a hyper-lethal hammer. Opponents charging them, expecting a grind, are met instead with the offensive output of like Blood Angels or World Eaters. This one synergy removes the Guard's most profound structural weakness.
So the Bulgrins hold the objective, activating the detachment's lethality for the tanks, and then they just delete anything that gets close. They're a black hole. Nothing gets out.
Okay, so the Bulgrins are the unbreakable shield. Then the Kaskern nuclear option is the surgical sword powered by the stratagem Mordian Minute.
Mordian Minute for 1 CP is maybe the most efficient damage-boosting stratagem in the game right now. For that single command point, it grants +1 strength to all ranged weapons in a unit that's been given the first-rank fire, second-rank fire order.
And since Kaskern are the premier special weapons carriers packing plasma and meltaguns, that +1 strength lets them punch way above their weight. Let's look at the breakpoints.
The gains are astronomical because of how that +1 strength shifts the wound roll. You always want to cross that threshold from needing a 5+ to wound to a 4+ to wound, or from a 4+ to a 3+. That's the sweet spot.
Okay, so take the plasma gun.
Plasma is baseline strength 8. Under Mordian Minute, it becomes strength 9. This means it's now wounding toughness 9 targets like rhinos or other light vehicles on a 4+ instead of a 5+. That single shift is a 50% efficiency gain against light armor.
So a 120-point Kaskern squad can now reliably pop transports. What about the meltaguns?
Meltaguns go from strength 9 to strength 10, and strength 10 is that magic number that now wounds toughness 10 battle tanks, including other Leman Russes on a 4+ instead of a 5+. Say again, a 50% efficiency gain against the hardest targets.
And even their standard guns get better.
Even the hotshot volley guns improve from strength 4 to strength 5, so they're wounding T4 Space Marines on a 3+ instead of a 4+, a 33% gain. The strategic impact is clear. A 120-point infantry unit can trade up into 300+ point targets. The opponent can't just focus on the big tanks anymore because any bush might hide a Kaskern squad ready to core a vehicle.
Exactly. And finally, we have to acknowledge the inherent reliability of heavy armor. The foundation of the Guard has always been its tanks, and they benefit immensely from that variance removal we talked about.
We're talking about the big boys, right? Rogal Dorn battle tank and the classic Leman Russ Demolisher. Take the Demolisher cannon. It's famous for high damage, but a super variable shot count, D6 plus 3 shots. Before, if you rolled a 1 for shots, you might only get 4. And if 2 missed, the damage was pathetic.
The total gamble. Now, with Take Aim and the reroll 1s, that variance is mitigated.
Even if you roll poorly for shots, every single one of those 4 shots is hitting on a 3+ rerolling 1s and wounding on a 3+ rerolling 1s. It becomes consistent, reliable damage.
And this defines the winning competitive archetype we're seeing everywhere, the castle build.
This is the one that David Smith used in his GT winning list, right? That's the one. The castle build uses a tank commander ordering himself and 2 Rogal Dorns. This maximizes T11, T12 hulls on the board, which forces the opponent to bring S12 plus weapons just to wound them efficiently. And at the same time, it delivers maximum offensive consistency.
It forces the opponent to answer an impossible question right at deployment.
The question is, do you have enough lascans or equivalent anti-tank to kill 3 major threats, all of which are hitting on 3s rerolling 1s in 2 turns? If the answer is no, the Guard wins right there.
Okay, so let's move from theory to reality and circle back to that core community sentiment. When Guard is on top, the meta is broken. We have definitive proof of this archetype's power, confirmed by data like David Smith's 6-0 victory at the Rise of the Empire GT. The Guard is demonstrably on top.
And we need to address why the community says the meta is broken. I think we have to compare the feeling of losing to Guard versus other top factions, because the actual win rate, while high, isn't astronomically higher than other top armies. It's the experience of the loss that breaks people's patience.
Okay, how does that breakdown look? What does it feel like to lose to, say, Eldari?
When you lose to Eldari dominance, it usually feels like you got outplayed. It's tricks, mobility, fate dice. It feels like getting outmaneuvered by a trickster who can see the future.
And Custodes?
Losing to Custodes dominance feels like hitting an unkillable brick wall. You know you're supposed to lose the attrition war, but you try anyway. It's an exhausting physical resistance.
But losing to Guard dominance under the Grizzled Company?
It feels like being executed by a firing squad. It's inevitable shooting damage from across the table delivered with mathematical certainty. The community's negative reaction stems from helplessness, from a lack of interactivity.
Total lack of interactivity.
Against Eldari, you can try to outsmart them. Against Custodes, you can try to swarm them. Against Grizzled Guard, if you step on an objective, the outcome is mathematically fixed. You are deleted. There is no counterplay to that level of consistency.
Now, to be fair, there is a counter-narrative, right? We have to address that for nuance.
Right. Some experienced players argue that Grizzled Company is actually weaker than the old Born Soldiers detachment from 9th edition because it lacks lethal hits, the automatic wounds. Their argument is that even with rerolls, wounding a T12 Knight with a Strength 10 battle cannon is still a 5+ roll, which is inefficient.
That's the argument. Yeah, the old way, fishing for that lucky 6 to auto wound, might have been better if you were willing to gamble, but the rebuttal is...
The rebuttal is this. The Grizzled Company doesn't need lethal hits because it provides high-strength consistency. Lethal hits was a crutch for low-strength weapons. It let a 3-strength lasgun kill a T10 tank, but only 16% of the time. Grizzled Company encourages players to use the right tool for the job. Strength 9 Plasma, Strength 10 Meltas, S18 Vanquishers, and it ensures that tool works. It removes the need for the crutch.
We also can't ignore the Guard's main remaining vulnerability, which is really the only avenue for counterplay.
They're fragile infantry. That remains the structural weakness. The scoring units, Guardsmen, Kaskarin, are still just toughness 3 with paper-thin saves. A smart opponent ignores the big Dorn Castle and just deep strikes to slaughter the infantry and deny primary scoring.
And this explains why the Bullgren synergy is so incredibly essential to the whole thing.
Precisely. It plugs that one durability gap. The Bullgrens act as an unkillable hyper-lethal anvil that can survive on the midboard long enough for the tanks to do their work. Without that Bullgren core, the Grizzled Company probably fold to armies with good deep-striking melee.
So let's return to the core sentiment one last time. Time for our time in the sun. This brings us to the NPC faction bias.
It's deeply ingrained in the community. The Guard player identity is built on struggle, on low stats, on playing the hard mode of 40k. They're regular humans fighting horrors with nothing but flak armor and faith. They are, by design, the NPCs of the setting.
They're there to die to show how scary the real protagonists are.
Exactly. The Space Marines, the Tyranids, the Eldar. So when the rules flip that script, when the NPCs start mathematically slaughtering the protagonists, it causes this deep cognitive dissonance in the community. People don't know how to react.
The community tolerates Eldari dominance because their whole fantasy is superiority and being tricksters. They struggle with Guard dominance because the Guard fantasy is struggle. When the Guard stops struggling and starts dominating with cold, hard efficiency, the narrative breaks for the opposing player, and that's when the broken label appears.
Okay, so the Grotmissas update fundamentally changed the competitive philosophy beyond just the Guard. Let's look at the 3 major implications defining the new meta, because this affects everyone.
Absolutely. This shift toward complex conditional synergy created a landscape defined by 3 new strategic truths.
The first is that the traditional failure state of battle shock is dead. Now, battle shock is a resource economy.
And we saw this perfectly with the new Blood Angels detachment, the Red Cursed Onslaught.
Precisely. They willingly accept the penalty of battle shock, OC0, no defensive stratagems, to immediately activate maximum lethality. They get +2 attacks, +1 strength, +1 AP. Battle shock is no longer just a failure state. It's a strategic offensive trigger you want to be in.
Which has a massive implication for list building. So if you're running an anti-morale army like Tyranids or Chaos Knights, you might now be unintentionally buffing your Blood Angels opponent.
You are. You're forcing them into the advantageous state they wanted to be in all along.
your counter-meta strategy suddenly gets very complicated. You have to ask yourself, do I even want to force this test? The answer is often no.
So the second major implication addresses defense, inspired by the new Dark Angels detachment, the superiority of math durability.
This is the realization that what we call paper durability, just having high toughness or a good armor save, is not enough anymore. The game is saturated with ways to bypass those stats. Lethal hits, rerolls like the Guard have, high AP weapons. Raw defense is no longer a guaranteed survival mechanism.
So what is math durability, and how does it succeed where paper durability fails?
It's defense that actually breaks the attacker's fundamental math. It's perfectly shown by the Dark Angels' dutiful tenacity rule in the Wrath of the Rock detachment, the prized -1 to wound modifier. This breaks the attacker's efficiency at the source before the save roll even happens.
Give us a specific data point on that.
An S8 plasma gun hits a T5 Terminator. Normally, that wounds on a 3+, a 55.5% chance. The -1 to wound modifier forces that to a 4+. That single shift is a 33% efficiency reduction for the attacker. It applies to every attack they make. It's arguably the single best defensive profile because it disrupts the core math of the game.
And the final implication speaks to the competitive climate itself, the death of the middle ground.
The new detachments reward extreme specialization. They reward skew lists. Their lists tuned to perfection to exploit one singular powerful mechanic.
Like the Grizzled Company demanding a critical mass of ordered tanks.
Or the Drukhari's Spectacle of Spite detachment, which demands you take 60+ witches to get the attack volume you need. These archetypes demand all-in investment. A generalist balance list, a list that's good at everything but great at nothing, just cannot efficiently answer the hyper-specialized questions these armies pose.
If your list is 50% anti-infantry and 50% anti-tank, you're going to get blown off the table by a list that is 100% focused on reliable anti-tank DPT, like the Guard Castle.
You can't bring the tools to counter infinite reliable strength 10 shots and an unbreakable core of -1 to wound Terminators on the same list. You have to specialize to counter specialization.
So, looking ahead to the next massive testing ground, the LVO, the community is urgently searching for the countermeta. If these Grotmiss armies are the problem, what's the solution? How do you beat an army built on eliminating variance?
Our analysis points to two main avenues to bypass these new strengths, and they both work by circumventing the core rules of the attack sequence.
The first one being the only damage type that truly ignores that new math durability.
Aggressive use of devastating wounds. Yes, devastating wounds are essential because the mechanic bypasses defensive modifiers like -1 to wound entirely. It often skips the save roll and just pushes direct mortal wounds through. It completely counters math durability.
You don't need high strength if you just skip the wound and save rolls altogether.
Exactly. So anything that generates large volumes of devastating wounds, certain Eldar units, some Chaos Marine combos, becomes a really strong meta counter.
And the second solution, which brings us back to dismantling the Grizzled Company engine itself,
precision weaponry. This is the surgical fix. The Guard's power isn't inherent in the tanks. It's a synergy chain powered entirely by officers. The Lord Solar, the Commissars, the tank commanders.
You have to snip the head of the snake.
You snipe those characters with precision attacks. Even if it's only one high-leveraged shot per turn, you dismantle the whole engine. You turn the reliable units back into variance assets simply by removing the source of the orders. Without orders, the tanks are back to hitting on 4s and losing their rerolls. It's the only way to surgically beat them without a hopeless attrition war.
So, a final synthesis.
The Grizzled Company is not broken by accident. It's broken through industrial efficiency. The update successfully identified the two biggest structural weaknesses of the Astra Militarum, the clunky order economy and the high ballistic skill variance, and surgically fixed both at the same time, while also giving them the melee anchor they desperately needed.
The philosophical shift is from probability, rolling dice and praying for success, to inevitability, re-rolling failures until success is guaranteed. The meta cracked under the treads of the Leman Russ because the Guard just refused to gamble anymore.
Which brings us full circle to our listeners' initial comment. The answer is clear. Yes, this is your time in the sun. It was bought with a massive points efficiency refund and an absolute removal of variance. And the community's complaint is rooted in the cognitive dissonance of watching the NPCs finally slaughter their protagonists. Enjoy the spotlight.
I think they will. That leaves us with a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over this week as the community braces for the next round of balance changes. We saw the Blood Angels deliberately weaponize battle shock, a failure state. So think about the 3 core new conditions that currently define the meta's most powerful archetypes: orders for the Guard, battle shock for the Blood Angels, and the assault keyword on heavy weapons for factions like Necrons and Space Marines. Which one of those 3 powerful conditional rule sets do you believe the developers will have to rebalance next? And what would be the severe ripple effects across the competitive landscape if that condition were nerfed by just 1 degree?
Considering the complexity and the overwhelming efficiency they unlock, the answer to that question really defines the future of 10th edition.
We'll see you next time for the next deep dive.